everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and Here We Are is a weekly show where we invite local folks to come on and talk about what they do, what they think about, and where they're going. Today on our show, we have someone who does a lot of things. We're not going to be able to talk about everything she does, but she's a writer. She is an actor, she's a photographer, she is also a business consultant, and she's now a member of the Brattleboro Select Board. We have with us today Shanta Lee Gander. Thank you, Shanta, for
Thank
coming
you.
on. Let's talk about your early years. I know that you've been here in Brattleboro for almost 10 years, but you didn't come. You weren't raised here. You weren't born here. So where did you come from?
I am originally from Hartford, Connecticut. So I'm a city girl. Lived most of my life in an apartment building with my mother, father, and younger brother. My younger brother is about 6 years older than me. Went to Hartford Public High School, blah, 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 right? All the usual stuff.
Yep.
But my childhood was, I have to just give the disclaimer, I'm no one's victim, so this is not a poor me, but when I look back on my childhood and some of the scenes from it, it's almost like I'm returning to the scene of a crime, so to speak. And the way I approach it by talking about it is through a lot of humor. I'm in the process of writing my memoir. So I'm working through all those different scenes in my life with humor, dark humor.
Dark humor, right.
Yes.
But you're able to tell those stories, and it's a way to enable you to tell those stories.
Yeah, you know, situations like, you know, growing up, because I didn't want to wear my cousin's hand-me-downs. You know, I had these fantasies of what type of life I wanted, and my mother would laugh at me. She would laugh. She, not in a laughing with, but laughing at sort of way. Some people may be familiar with this snippet that I told before. Suzanne Kingsbury did a great sketch of me for the Ms. Magazine blog, and there's a story I told her that it was my first time just kind of disrobing, and I'd shared that physical and emotional abuse at home. And my mother, you know, as I'd be getting beaten, she would just ask me, who do you think you are? And I would have to repeat, I'm nobody. Now, again, this is not a poor me saga, but I used that as fuel, and I used it to kind of combat whatever she was telling me. She looms large. My father was at work most of the time. So while they were together, she looms large, and I had to tell myself, no, I am somebody, and I'm just going to show her and anybody else how much of a somebody I really am. And then I had to kind of revise that and make sure it was coming from a place of making sure I really wanted to do those things as opposed to being on some tear.
So at a very early age, you were starting to form your own identity, really, and create your own identity.
I had to, like, especially if, you know, school children calling me ugly, you know, this, you know, funny moments like that where I go into the bathroom and kind of looking at different parts of my face to check and say, no, my nose seems all right. I think my eyes are okay. I think my lips are okay. Okay. You know, I'm going to have to tell myself a different story.
Wow.
I wrote in a journal for about over 25 years.
Wow.
So I processed through talking to the notebook.
And you did that on your own, though. That was your way. It was a very self-created way of dealing with this.
Yes, because I didn't have any friends. Well, let me take that back. I didn't have any role models. I had friends. I was very lucky and blessed and fortunate. My mother used to say, you know, friends will come and go, but your family always stays. And I thought, uh-oh, I am so screwed. If family stays, I am screwed. So I'm going to flip that so that you can't choose your family. You certainly can create a family, though. And that's what I did. And I was lucky enough to meet some amazing people that I started to carefully choose. I wasn't allowed to go out, wasn't allowed to date. I was on lockdown. I was a good kid too, though. I was just a good kid. So it was just sort of like, you know, I guess it worked to some advantage, though, in some degree, because there was no question that I was, you know, going to college. There was a 13-year-old who became pregnant on my street growing up, and by her boyfriend, who was slightly older. And so my mother became terrified. And I think part of that was because she was trying to protect me in her own way with what she had. And she had me at 19 with my father. There was a 10-year difference between the two of them. And she had me at 19 years old. And I think we've never talked about it. I do not really have a working relationship with my parents. But I think it was something for her that she wanted to protect me and make sure I had a different path.
Yeah.
In her own twisted way,
her own
though,
way,
because it
yeah.
was she was very physically abusive and very verbally abusive and tearing me down. And I'm not sure what part of that had to do with her and her relationship with herself, which was probably very complicated.
Right, right. And I'm curious, you know, about your reaction to that, your response to that, and the fact that you were able, at what age was it when you started really, like, starting to write and starting to create your own image?
Oh my goodness, I was 11 or 12. Yeah, 11 or 12 years old. I was supposed to be in bed, and I couldn't use the light, because if I turned the light on, you know, my mother would know I was still up and I'd be in trouble. So I would write with the lights that were beaming off of the other apartment building coming through my window. And so I'd like be trying to write and like and hide all my notebooks so that they would not be discovered in terms of what I was talking about and the crushes. And, you know, my own little private life didn't stop because of what my mother was saying and doing to me. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, at the same time, you, as you say, you know, you were creating your own identity, which was free and clear, actually.
I envisioned myself being someone different, and it's kind of, it was hilarious because glamorous always is the word that comes to mind. I know that may seem superficial, but I think I latched on to that vision because there were the hand-me-downs. Like it's not like my parents couldn't take me school shopping, but I fantasized about a life that was just way different. I didn't want to wear my cousin's hand-me-downs. I wanted my own clothes. I wanted this certain type of life. I wrote some goals down once at 14, and they're things that are largely intangible. Like I wrote down happiness and love and freedom. It's like, what does a 14-year-old really know about those things? But I think what I really was trying to get at was freedom to be and create my own self. And I started to really hone in and say, no one is standing in my way in terms of what I get to create and who I say I get to be and how I get to arrive into the world. And in her own, way, I think parents try to do the best they can with what they have.
Right, right.
So I'm not going to just sit and bash my parents, but I think that, whatever outcome they wanted, it ultimately happened. I wish it happened a little bit differently to allow me to still have a relationship with them.
Right, right. And so can you see, looking back, how all of that informed how you continued the trajectory of your life?
Absolutely. I saw education as my freedom path. I figured, great, if I go to college, and now I know that in today's society and what we know of the economy and how we fumbled that as a society, that's not a promised investment. So I want to make that clear. But at the time, I'm thinking, if I go to college, I can get out of this apartment with my parents. Like, I don't have to live at home anymore. I can be on my own. I can be an adult. I can travel the world. I always had this vision, watching or seeing pictures from National Geographic and thinking, wow, I was always drawn to images. And so I guess it it's no surprise why I ended up being a photographer as well and traveling.
Right,
But
right.
it did feed, to answer your question, it did totally feed
Yeah.
into me just, catapulting myself. The fear of failure, which looked like being trapped in a place that felt very miserable in terms of some of the things that were happening in my home growing up.
Right.
So I wanted a life way different from that.
Right. And when was the time, can you remember a time when you started getting the response from the world, from other people, to this new creature that you'd created, actually?
I think it was when I was 18 years old, and I don't think my mother appreciated it much. One of her close friends that she had said, saw me, thinks she hadn't seen us in a while. I was 18, newly 18, and she says to my mother, wow, she's really beautiful. She's beautiful. And I remember my mother giving me a lecture one day about how I was not beautiful. The validation largely had to fall back on me and my network of friends. Like, they were invaluable. Some of my friends from middle school and high school, very invaluable to help continue to validate who I became.
Yeah. And so you get yourself to college and you start getting involved in different kinds of things. And how, knowing your background, knowing where you came from, what kinds of things were you drawn to?
That's an interesting question, because what I did, I was very withdrawn when I first went to college. There was a real splash of cold water on me around class. And I'll never forget, there was a young woman on my floor at Trinity College where her father owned a private jet. And I'm like, it just dawned on me, whoa. The girls, on another occasion, the girls on the floor all got together to basically say my boyfriend, who was tall, very dark, had the body of a football player, to say he'd been harassing them and hanging out in the hallway. So that was my brush with racism, feeling like an other. I was so determined that I couldn't flunk out of college. I had to graduate college so that I could get on with my life. And it has less to do with Hartford, more to do with my parents. Get as far away from anything that had to do with family as possible so that I could create the life I wanted. Part of it too is because I was involved with raising my younger brother.
Oh.
And so he's autistic, not high functioning. So I wanted to get away from that, and I just wanted my own life. I wanted to be free.
And what did you do? Where was the first place where you really broke out?
After Trinity, they offered me a job, so I ended up staying in Hartford, creating and implementing two after-school programs for academic mentoring, matching Trinity College students with Hartford Magnet Middle School students. And it was something I believed in. So I said, wow, this is an amazing opportunity. I should do it. And at the same time, I took an opportunity to work in New Haven to create Planned Parenthood of Southern New England's first statewide internship program.
Oh, wow.
And working, so juggling, telecommuting, and, but I think it started because there was a moment that I actually stopped talking to my parents while I was in college. And because I didn't want to go home anymore over the summers. I literally would physically get sick. And so I took a stand. I would say I took a stand. I actually stopped talking to everyone in the family. Not that my mother was particularly close to her family. I stopped talking to them for years until I decided to reach back out to my grandmother and to on my mother's side, to my aunts.
Going back to the sort of life beyond what you were seeing after college, and what was it that really sort of built fire underneath you?
I stayed with Planned Parenthood for years, even through graduate school. And I'll never forget, they had a global partnership. I was around 26, 27 years old. And everyone at the affiliate in the New Haven state office where I worked knew about it. And we were so excited. We were like, oh my God. You know, all of us were learning about our global partners with Uganda. A delegation from us was going to go there for a couple of weeks, and they were going to come here. And I was thinking, wow, that's cool. I get called into the office, I think it was like 2006, late summer after my summer vacation. And I thought I was in trouble. they told me I was actually one of two, like three total of us. So one of the three total people going to Uganda that I was chosen to go. And I was thinking, oh my God, I can't believe it took me to 27 years old to be like, to get out of the country. I didn't necessarily have mapped out goals for the career or profession, but I knew what I wanted to put into the soup for ingredients. Go to college, build all my skills, know that I would have skills so that I could have good negotiation, so that I could go into some place and say, no, you know, here's what I'm worth, I know what I'm worth, and here's what I bring to you. Know what I was looking for in terms of opportunity. All these things, all the positions, most of them I've ever held were created for me, or I got to step in and create something.
So many of the things that you do here in Brattleboro, from the Arts Council of Windham County to the new People, Places, and History of Words in Brattleboro, which we will get to, to social justice curriculum, seem to have come out of that, to realize that, you know, you wanted to organize, you wanted to get people talking, you wanted to start conversations, you wanted to get people thinking about these bigger issues.
Yes, definitely, and also a reinvention of myself. You see, my contract in New Haven, I was driving from Vermont to New Haven as I was moving to Vermont, 2 hours each way. And I had this contract around social determinants of health, what creates or builds a healthier city or healthier people. When that ended, I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? The person I was with at the time, we both went to, I used my savings, we went to India. 5 months. Living in India, came back, I had no job. And so then I started to think, okay, maybe I'll suggest to the Reformer that I could get a column. They said they didn't have space for a column, so they set me up with a blog. So I said, okay, no problem. And then I took my resume out and went to different places to try to volunteer my way and say, I have an MBA, I have these skills, would love to provide you with these services for free. Just to get my foot in some door, build relationships. Started joining boards, Women's Freedom Center, and then I moved on to the Arts Council. Didn't realize I was going to become president of the Arts Council, but then when I did, I was so afraid because I wanted to do a good job, and then I decided it was a great opportunity for me to just continue to build, and within the Arts Council, creating something that reached across Mass and New Hampshire as best I could with the arts forums and with Art Story, which I created, that Esler, you know, I've handed off to Esler. So yes, in that spirit, organizing Slow Living Summit, that spirit of no one's gonna come find you to give you something, but coming back from India and saying, yeah, I'll do a photo exhibition. It was my very first one. You know, and looking to hone my skill and inviting people into these different realities. But going back to what you were saying, conversation, and inviting people to talk about really tough things, or look at maybe my images or writing and think about some of the questions they might want to ask themselves.
So that, along with a social justice piece, with providing curriculum for Oak Meadow?
Yes, what I did, I was tapped a few years ago to create and teach their first, and I believe their only, asynchronous course with students all over the country and also potentially all over the world. Talking around issues around gender, race, sexuality, class, and getting them to really think about it. Not to be the social justice police, that's not my take. My take is, let's look at these things, let's be aware. I think there's a continuum around activism, for example. All activism does not have to look like leading a march on DC. No diss. Those things are very important, but also we need room for the activism that looks like, I'm going to educate myself. I think I'll bring up this very difficult conversation with someone, or I think I'll try to talk to this group of people that I've not normally tried to engage with or talk to, or ask myself some really, like the class passing, you know, when I said I can class pass with the best of them. No one would necessarily believe, not that I didn't grow up in shambles, I was never hungry, I was fully clothed, but it wasn't you know, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. And so these things, so many of these things, you also had on radio on WKVT, Ponder This, which is musings and getting people to think and ask questions of themselves, and your forum series. And so how, you know, you've been in Brattleboro 10 years. How
close to 10 years.
Close enough.
I always like to say I'm a city girl at heart.
Well, that can always be true, but even so.
Yes.
So how has Brattleboro supported you in all this? How have you felt in terms of the community itself, being part of the community, being able to do these initiatives and start these things and getting the conversations going? How have you felt here?
The community here is very interesting, and you know, as someone who, you know, now I'm a select board member, so I'm interested in the health of the community. But one of the things I always struggled with, or that I've been challenged by, is the fact that we, and I use the term loosely, we take great pride in calling ourselves progressives or forward thinking. And then at the same time, there's a way in which we have a very hard time recognizing certain things, whether it's around ageism or classism or racism. You know, classism in the sense of, you know, not everybody's going to have a choice to say they only want to shop fair trade. You know, the farmer's market, it's a great place. It's got great vegetables, but not everybody may afford to be at the farmer's market or know that they could afford to be there.
Right.
You know, the gaps between understanding around energy and sustainability and conservation. Well, how does that work, you know, for certain people here? So for me, I've found it's been very easy to collaborate with people. What's been challenging is to have the really tough conversations around things like, let's say, race or calling certain things out in our community that people may have a hard time just talking about. And I find talking with each other, the secrecy, and not just in Brattleboro, but just everywhere that may be like a small town or a small city like Brattleboro, the inability to really want to come to the table, or at least try to, even if we fumble, but trying to. And I've found that that's been a challenge, that there's this gloss over, we're progressive and we're moving forward, and then at the same time, there may be rot in our foundation in terms of some of the things that we're standing for that we shouldn't be standing for.
And so much of that is conversation, getting to know people, talking to people.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And also, too, the one thing I do want to say, because you asked me, how is it community held? Or I've found some people to be open, but at the same time, I had to go and be the one, you know, on my social media. If this is what I want to see, like that, you know, there's a cliche, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. Well, I do stand by that. If that's what I want to see or encourage, I can start. And whatever I'm writing or whatever, you know, when I'm having a conversation, not all the time, not beating people over the heads, but just creating space to just ask questions.
When you do the acting piece, the Lucy Terry Prince, which is part of the People, Places, and History of Words in Vermont, I would think that that would also be a kind of venue for you to experiment with that.
Oh, it's been an amazing opportunity.
And could you just tell the audience, I think a lot of people are aware of this, but just who Lucy Terry Prince was?
Sure. So Lucy Terry Prince, for some of you who may not know, she was a free person of color, a free black woman, married to Abijah Prince, and they both owned land in the area. Free landowning blacks right in the Guilford area. And she believed in using the law, like knowing her rights, talking about her rights, going and arguing a couple of cases before the highest courts in Vermont. And so there's something about Lucy that, as complicated as my family history is, got me re-engaged to go back to my family history and try to find out full context, try to get some of those family stories as best I can. The whole power of voice, the power of witness. What does it mean to really witness something? In this day and age, how can we witness? The witness isn't necessarily the one with the biggest megaphone. Sometimes the witness is someone who maybe wrote something down and it gets shoved into a drawer and then rediscovered. Her poem survived for 100 years, an oral tradition, before it was seen in print in one of the New England papers. And I channel that, or at least I seek to channel that. I can't say for sure if I do, but I try to.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few times in my life I've ever done recitation. I don't even memorize my own poetry or work. And that was something that was an opportunity when Lissa Weinman of 118 came and invited me. She's pulling the project together. You know, she's one of the acting directors, and she's doing an amazing job working with Marlborough College and all these other partners involved, the Brattleboro Literary Festival. And she tapped me to give me this opportunity, and I kept thinking about it, thinking, can I do this? Can I really? Nervous.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, this is an opportunity. I'm all about go in different directions, push outside of my comfort zone. That's what I did, and I'm very thankful for it. I've written an article about Lucy Terry Prince for Ms. Magazine blog, and continuing to do more work to spread awareness.
Yeah.
And
I know that you've been writing a book.
yes.
Yes. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Okay, so the book is a little bit, it's a mouthful. Ghosts of Cuba in Black and White and American Interracial Couples. Month-long quest for meaning in Cuba in the age of Trump. And it's coming out spring 2019, Green Writers Press. And we did not, my husband and I'm co-authoring it with him. It's told in images and words. It's our essays. We were doing dispatches that started with Phil Inns's Vermont Views website. And we had a few dispatches that we were writing back to the United States. And against the backdrop of the reestablishment of the ban, literally about a week and a half, 2 weeks after we purchased our tickets, people were writing us saying, you sure you're going to be able to go to Cuba? I said, I'll be arrested going to Cuba. I'm going to Cuba. And then getting there and realizing we didn't have an American embassy. The American embassy had a skeleton crew shut down for some things they were investigating for what may or may not happen. They come to the conclusion now it may have been misplaced sound devices, but still it put a strain on two countries that already have a very interesting, dicey relationship for about 120 years before the revolution, before Fidel Castro. So it's been a fascinating project.
Oh, it sounds like it.
Yeah, we're excited. So I would say to everybody, look out for our book and look out for some of our writing, and we're always on the move doing cool things.
You are always on the move
Yeah.
doing cool things, Shanta. It was wonderful having you.
It was great
Yeah,
having you
yeah.
too.
I love hearing
Thank
your
you.
story.
Thank you for having me. Actually, that's what I meant to say.
We are so glad we're so glad you could carve out a little bit of
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Because you're such a busy person.
Yes.
No, it's great. Wonderful
Yes.
stories. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks to all of you for joining us today. And it was wonderful having Shanta on. And look out for her book, which again is Green Mountain Writers Press, which is one of our local treasures here in town. Thanks for tuning in today. We will be back next week, and we hope to see you then. Thank you.